I'm anxious and excited to hear about what you folks create after coming out of this Border Issues Fair, what you go back to your home communities and what you do, what you work on. Because I'm sure 10 years from now, we'll be talking about at the 2019 Border Issues Fair, people got inspired, people got motivated, and they went out and created something big and something beautiful, because now is the time that we need that, now more than ever. Right? As Randy said, I started working on the Minutemen issue back in the 2005, 2006. And I'll talk a little bit about that today. I'll talk about some of the cases that we've worked on and leave some time for questions and answers if you have so at the end, right? I'm originally from a small border town called Douglas, Arizona. Everybody, D-Town, right? Douglas is in the house. For those of you not from Arizona, I thought I'd put the map up there, right? There you go. So I love using this little picture because it gives you the impression that beautiful Douglas is right on the beach, right? Oceanfront property, you know, cruises down to Cancun. Not really, but it is right there. Whoever did this map must not thought too highly of Mexico, like not even important to put it there. My mom was born on the other side of that red line in a town called Agua Prieta, Sonora. I was born in Douglas. Because I was born 2 miles roughly north of where she was born, I was born as a U.S. citizen. So the concept of citizenship to me has always been something to question, because I don't understand where it's the same community where we have relatives on that side of the border and this side of the border, why I get the benefit of citizenship and the folks born 2 miles south of me don't. And this also gives the visual of where we come from in Douglas. My mom's side of the family is from First Street, right? So my tata, my mom's mom and dad, not an tata, and my mom grew up on First Street. So if you're thinking about it, there's big border fence, which Mr. Trump, it already exists, all right? It's already there. There's big border fence, and then there's International right there, and then there's First Street, and then it goes up. So if you're in our backyard in First Street and you got a good arm, you can throw a rock into Mexico, which I wouldn't do because I might hit somebody. But it trips people out when I take them down there and they see visually where we come from and the community I grew up in, or was born in. Sorry, I moved up to Phoenix when I was about 4 or 5. We would still go back for summers, and at the time then I didn't even speak Spanish when I was a little kid. So we'd go to my grandparents' house and they only spoke Spanish with my mom, and I was clueless of what was going on. So we would go out and play in the border. That was our playground, was the border. Back then it was a chain link fence. A chain link fence with holes all over the place. So we would literally play a game where my brothers, who were much more older and more courageous than I, would run into Mexico, touch a piece of Mexico, and try to outdo who could run further before the Border Patrol would come in and say, hey, go back to grandma's house, right? Now you can't do that. Now you can't play that game. Now it's not even one fence. Now it's a double fence with the canal, with the ditch there, and it's impossible to get through right there in the borderland. So I've grown up seeing the militarization of the border firsthand. And that's a little bit what I wanted to talk about. And if you don't know where Nogales is, directly south of us, and then Douglas is to the east towards New Mexico. So what is militarization? I'm sure a topic that you all are very familiar with nowadays. This is a presentation that I've been doing about border issues for over a decade, and it used to be like, oh, let me tell you what militarization is. Now people know, but I do like showing these visuals still for folks. This is a little girl. I took this one here in Nogales back in 2005, 2006. I had just gotten off a school bus, right? So she was just off school bus, and she was walking back to her house. And to me, it's a representation of the problem of militarization. And I'm sure you're learning all about the environmental impacts it'll have, the impacts it'll have on wildlife. But to me, it's also important to stress the impact it'll have on the psychology of young people like this little girl. When you grow up in a militarized zone, it sends a signal to you that those on the other side are inferior and something to be afraid of, and they're dangerous. And when you see your own skin looking like the people on the other side of that fence, you could internalize that you're also inferior, that you're also not wanted, that you're also not loved, that you're also not special. So militarization, to me, annoys me and frustrates me for that reason, the impact that it has on young brown people living in the borderlands. Here's the cameras that they have already up there. So when I lived in Douglas, I went back. I took 2 years off between my second and third year of law school to come back and work on the vigilante issue in Douglas. I'd go out for the run, and I know National Guard somewhere was watching me while I was out going for a jog. These are those little towers that they put up with agents or cameras in there as well. A longer shot from Nogales where you can see the fence and then the camera post and then the lights that they lighted up at night. And here's we actually have a tank. So I was out following the Minutemen back in 2006. I believe this was in New Mexico. And what we would do is we would take video cameras and find these are individuals who would come down to the borderlands, but to hunt for immigrants as opposed to help them out, right? So we thought, well, if we followed them with video cameras, they wouldn't hurt anybody because it'll be on film, right? So that was the rationale. So we'd go out 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the middle of the desert, and one day we're driving along, and I say to my friends in the car, man, I think I just saw a tank. And I wasn't getting a lot of sleep at the time, so I thought maybe I was just being, crazy or something. I was like, Minutemen don't have enough money for a tank, right? Those tanks are probably pretty expensive. And we keep driving, and we keep seeing then these actual tanks from the military. They were out there to observe and report, allegedly, and work with the Border Patrol to guide them to the migrants that were coming across. I've walked up to them to try to have a conversation with them. It was not a fruitful conversation, right? One, it was 2, 3 a.m. in the morning, and it was, pitch black out. But two, they are in the war zone mentality. It's not like I'm an army guy and I'm only going to turn that on if I'm in Iraq or if I'm in Afghanistan, but you're on a mission, you're in the border zone, and you're thinking, and I remember walking up to this guy and he thought he was in the middle of a war with the anger and the rage and yelling that he was directing towards me. And if he's doing that to me, a U.S. citizen, how are they treating migrants when they come across them, even though they're not supposed to be, Posse Comitatus Act, engaging in domestic enforcement of the laws? Another picture from a rancher outside of the Douglas area. Roger Barnett, is that a name that means anything to people? Right? And now we have the problem of Warren Buffett's son. Have you heard about that one? Unbelievable. So I was in law school. So I grew up in the Phoenix area, went to ASU for undergrad, went to Stanford for law school. You're supposed to say, ooh, oh, wow, you went to Stanford, right? From Douglas to Stanford. So I'm at Stanford and I absolutely hate it. Miserable, because we live paycheck to paycheck, a lot of love in the household, not a lot of money growing up. Went to public schools, went to state school for university, and then I go to this rich, privileged, elite institution. I'm like, I'm here to learn about social justice and changing the world. What's going on? You're telling me to go corporate law and learn about contracts. So I was looking for an excuse to leave, quite honestly, and I applied for a fellowship through the ACLU called the Ira Glasser Racial Justice Fellowship. I did my summer internship down here at the ACLU of Arizona. A woman by the name of Eleanor Eisenberg helped me write the application. I sent it off, and I think I was the only Latino that applied because they gave it to me. And the other ones that got it were like Kimberly Crenshaw, who's this amazing scholar activist that teaches part-time at Columbia, part-time at UCLA. And I just got really lucky, and they gave me money for 2 years to take off law school to come down and work on this vigilante issue. One of the first things we did was a public records request on vigilante abuse. So I remember going to the Cochise County Attorney's Office and them giving me boxes of documents of private citizens who had abused migrants crossing the border that nobody had ever read before, that were never in any newspapers, that were never anywhere. So what we did with those documents is go down into Mexico, look for the individuals that were beaten and abused by the vigilantes, to sign them up for a lawsuit to sue the ranchers. And we ended up being successful, suing Roger Barnett, getting what's called U visas for some of the people that were abused, and they now live here in the U.S., and that was one of the first things we worked on. Thank you. around that time, look at this young guy, this strapping young lad right here. That was back then, 2005. I still have that hat. Don't have the t-shirt, probably wouldn't fit into it, but I do still have the hat. And this is when we were out there following the Minutemen. Because right when I came back from my trips to Mexico to finding folks, we heard from the Southern Poverty Law Center that there was a lot of white supremacists that wanted to join the Minutemen Project. Brief overview for those that haven't heard about it. Don't feel bad if you didn't. Hopefully it's a period in our history that gets forgotten. But private citizens came down to the border to encourage basically what we have now is, border walls and more enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. And we were out there training the folks, and I wanted to share just one of the stories from the months that we spent in the desert because it's had such a huge impact on my life and how I view immigration. We would come across people who were crossing and had been walking for 2, 3, 4 days on a pretty regular basis. I think we probably found more people than the Minutemen found, right? And we would give them food and water and help them out. One particular day, and this was not too far from here, out by Ajo, we were waiting for the Minutemen to come out of their little ranch. They were doing a little shift change. So we're sitting out there in front of their ranch, they're lining up, and I look down the road and I see some bushes moving. And I tell my friends that I'm with, hey, I'm going to be right back. I'm just going to make sure it's not a migrant because that's going to be really bad if they come out as the Minutemen are driving by, right? So we go down there and I yell out in Spanish, have food, have water, friendly person. And all of a sudden I start seeing somebody come out of the bushes. And they're waddling, with a cane, a jug of yellow liquid in the other hand. And the person's skin is so black that I can't tell what their ethnicity is, purple lips. I've never seen anybody closer to death than this man, right? And I'm just in a state of shock because the Minutemen are about to come out, and here's this guy that looks horrible. And so I tell him right away, hey, we need to get you to a hospital. I can call, the Border Patrol to get here, to air evac you out. You need attention. He goes, no, please, no. If that happens, I'm going to go to jail. I need to see my family. You can't call the Border Patrol. So, okay, it's fine. Well, here's some food and water, and hey, have you heard about the Minutemen? They're right over here. You don't want to go there. He's like, I was about to go to that house and ask for help. No, you don't want to do that. That'd be a bad idea. So I gave him the food and water, and he asked me, can you give me a ride? Every migrant that I've seen out there, all of you that go out there, do it, you know it. And when the first question is, can you give me a ride? I'm so sorry, I can't. I had enough law school training by then. I knew it was a felony to give someone a ride in furtherance of their remaining in the United States. So I said what I had said 100 times already. No, I'm sorry, I can't do that. It's against the law, but I can give you food and water, that way's north. Every single time before that was the end of the conversation. There was nobody asked me a second time, can you give me a ride? Well, he did. He asked me a second time, please, can you give me a ride? I said, no, and it's all going through my mind, I'm in law school at Stanford, I'm going to lose won't be able to go back to law school, won't be able to graduate, do 10 years in prison. No, I can't do this. And he asked me a third time, literally looks in the back seat of my car, says, I'll lay down right there, nobody will see me, can you please give me a ride? Right? So then I'm thinking to myself, well, I go around to college campuses and talk about the border and immigration and human rights and fight for what you believe in and morality over legality, et cetera, et cetera. What a hypocrite I am to not do something, right? So I tell him, all right, man, we'll help you out. It's broad daylight right now. The Minutemen are right there. Go back in there. We'll come back at night, and we'll help you out. Right? So he goes back into the bushes, and I go back and tell everybody what happened. As I'm driving back, as I'm getting in my car, I remember him telling me, do you have a Coke? I'm like, man, this guy's so near death. And all he's asking for is a Coke. It was, to me, one of the strangest things. And we didn't have Coke. You didn't even drink soda at that time. I remember going back to my friends, opening up the cooler that we had, and there was actually 2 little Cokes in there, which was the strangest thing ever. So we went back and left that for him and told him, hey, you got to stay tight. Minutemen still haven't left yet. They're still waiting. Go back over there, and I see him coming out of the bushes again. He didn't trust me. He didn't believe me that I was going to come back, right? I mean, why would you if you're near death? So I ride back over there again. I tell him, look, man, we're going to come back, blah, blah, blah. As I'm talking to him, I hear the rumble of a diesel engine. Those of you from the border, when you hear a diesel engine, right? Like I lived on First Street, Douglas at the time, so I knew that sound of a diesel engine was probably a Border Patrol. So I said, all right, man, hey, look it. We didn't talk about anything about a ride. You just sit right here, say nothing. So the Border Patrol pulls up to us. It's just me and the guy. He's leaning back against my car. And he tells me, rolls down his window, he says, did you call in any illegals? And I was like, no, man, I work for the ACLU. I'm here to make sure people don't get hurt, don't get abused. I don't call, anything. He looks at me, looks at the guy. Obvious, right? Obvious. Just rolls up his window and says, have a nice day. Vroom, takes off. True story, right? Crazy true story. So at that point, the guy finally trusts me. So he goes back into the desert and stays there. And then at night, people, brave, courageous people come, pick him up, get him up to where he needs to go. So that was my first time engaging in felony activity, conspiracy, back on the U.S.-Mexico borderlands. How I'm an attorney right now, I'm not sure, but I am. I just paid $500 again yesterday at Arizona State Bar, and I'm still licensed, so that's a great thing. And that to me, that was the story to share with you all because of the morality of immigration and the immorality of our laws. How many of you heard about the decision yesterday about no more deaths? So for those of you that didn't hear, No More Deaths volunteers were cited. There's one still pending felony, which is a more serious case, Scott Walker, right? But the 4 yesterday were found guilty by U.S. Magistrate Judge Bernie Velasco for abandoning property on a national wildlife refuge. And for, I think it was, one was driving on the lands without a permit, and I think being there without a permit as well. So they were found, the trial was earlier this week. They were found guilty yesterday by Judge Velasco, and their sentencing will be in a couple of weeks. They're facing up to 6 months in federal prison. I don't think, as someone that's done federal defense, still does federal defense, I don't think Judge Velasco is going to hit them, and I've been in front of Judge Velasco many, many times, is going to hit them with jail or prison time, but it is so infuriating to see people giving humanitarian aid, as No More Deaths has been doing for so many years, get these tickets and get charged and get hauled into federal court and now have criminal convictions on their record. To me, it's immoral, it's unjust, and those 4 folks who had the conviction yesterday, I want them to know from all of you that we care about them, we love them, and regardless of what a judge says, we know that they did the right thing, right? I'm the volunteer attorney for No More Deaths Phoenix chapter, but I'm not involved at all with the defense of what happened with the Tucson folks. But I know they have great attorneys, and they're going to appeal, and they're going to keep fighting, and hopefully they get a victory at the end of the day. Transition to, I went back to law school, making the story short, came back and was doing work on the border in Douglas, Agua Prieta. Met my wife at a Joe Arpaio protest. So fell in love, moved up to Phoenix, got married to her. We started a nonprofit up there. Now it's about 2008 or so. And unfortunately, the economy was going all the way down. So I graduated law school, all that good stuff. And then we didn't have any money, car repossessed, her house was foreclosed on. And I had my degree, but I hadn't taken the bar exam because I had no desire to be an attorney. I had no desire to practice in an unjust, racist system. Didn't want to be a part of it. We were at the time then doing kind of similar Minutemen watching, but against Sheriff Joe, who was doing what he called crime suppression sweeps, which is basically sending a lot of law enforcement officers out into the middle of Latino communities and pulling anybody over for cracked windshield, no tail light, in hopes of getting them deported. So we would follow the officers, film them, yell at them, et cetera, et cetera. One day, we were following people and saw a young man get pulled over, and I'm there shouting and yelling, And then an attorney shows up. I think, great, finally an attorney's here. Something's good's going to happen, because that's what attorneys do. They do good things, right? And the attorney gets there, and there's a person being detained by law enforcement, and there's an Univision camera over here, and guess where they went first? Univision camera first, right? I'm just like, you're an attorney, like you can go tell the person not to say anything, not give any statements, like why you run to the camera first? So it was really that moment that we said to ourselves, well, we're broke, and I have this law degree from Stanford, might as well take the bar and become an attorney and help out the community, because it seems like we're getting screwed over in that area too. So did that, went down, first did immigration law up in Phoenix area, then went down to the Cochise County Public Defenders, which is in Bisbee, beautiful little city that you all should get to know, 15 minutes from Douglas. Worked there representing undocumented immigrants charged with state crimes. Then went on to work at the Federal Public Defenders, working with immigrants charged with federal crimes, done Operation Streamline many times. My cover letter in that job was, I want to fight Operation Streamline, any other program that the federal government comes to criminalize migrants. So did that for 2 years. And my wife was finishing up her dissertation. We just had our first little baby boy. We had nobody in Tucson. Loved Tucson, had nobody there. All of our family was in Phoenix. Some guy just happens to approach me and says, hey, you don't know state law, do you? I was like, yeah, I was a county public defender before I was federal defender. Oh, you don't have to know immigration law, do you? I was like, no, I actually practice immigration. That's my passion, is immigration, immigrants' rights. He's like, well, I have an office in Phoenix. I need somebody to run it. Would you be interested in that? And then so I asked my boss, I said, hey, is there any openings in the Phoenix office? Because I love federal public defenders. Great job, great people to work with, fight the good fight, don't have to charge anybody money, amazing. He said, no, there's no position. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to go work for this guy then. Very understanding, very cool. Move up to Phoenix, and it takes me a week to realize this guy is a shady, not good guy. You hear rumors about them in the community, right? Like, oh, they take people's money, they don't do anything. He was one of those guys. And I didn't do my research on it before I said, yeah, and we moved up to Phoenix. So I'm there for a week, and I'm like, well, I can fix it. I don't know business, I don't want to know business. Let him do that, and I'll work the cases, and it'll be good. 2 or 3 days later, I meet someone who he charged $5,000 to get their papers, and there's no possibility. Like, there wasn't even an application I could fill out to get the guy's papers. And it was just one after one after one. So after 2 weeks, talking with my wife again, and said, well, what do we do? I can't go back. They just threw me a going away party, the Federal Public Defenders. I can't go back there, can't turn back. And can't continue to work for this guy, obviously. This is horrible. I'm going to report him to the bar. And we just said, well, let's just open our own law office. Might as well, right? So there's, So we have Facebook, and we put on Facebook, have our own law office, criminal immigration, love to help somebody. And rent a little space, smaller than this podium, right? It was like $200 a month or something, which I thought, like, oh my God, can we afford $200 a month? This is crazy. And we did that, and we got cases because we were activists. Because we had both been involved in the community for so long. They're like, hey, we know Ray, we know Angeles, we can trust them, go let them help you. So I still remember the first check I got for a U visa. It was my first case, which I stole from the other shady guy, right? Said, come over and talk to me. And then she's shaking her hand to give me $1,000. And I'm shaking to grab the check for $1,000. And I grab it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? So I go to the bank, cash the check, and go buy a laptop to work the case, because we didn't even have a laptop at the time. Living at my in-laws' house, no money saved up, little baby, and we just got to make this happen. So one of our first cases was Miguel Angel Morales Sedano. Miguel Angel was arrested by Sheriff Joe Arpaio at a construction site raid. So for those of you that don't know Sheriff Arpaio, he moved from the crime suppression sweeps of randomly pulling people over to going SWAT team, whole 9 yards, into places of employment and arresting undocumented immigrants for working, or as they say, providing false documentation, right? He was arrested there. The family came to me, took the case, said, let's do it, let's see what we can make happen. And other attorneys in the community would even call me out. Why are you taking that case? There's nothing that can be done. Like, the guy's guilty. It's a fake document case. There's no remedy. The county attorney at the time is charging the crimes and giving pleas after being trained by ICE how to get people deported for certain convictions. So it's a no-win situation. You're horrible for taking the people's money. I'm like, well, let's find out. Like, let's do something. I met some very intelligent, creative people that had arguments on preemption, that it's the federal government that should be prosecuting these cases, not states. Because if you have 50 whatever states doing prosecutions differently than the feds, that's a problem. Right? We have to know what the laws are, so it's preemption. So I stole their argument, and I filed a motion to dismiss based on preemption. Judge agrees with me on some of the stuff, says, all right, you can't use the driver's license, you can't use anything, you can't use the I-9 documents attached to that, everything else can come in. Any other document that you signed, waivers, I'll use my safety hat, whatever, those can be used. So we're going to go to trial just to preserve the issue, to appeal it to Ninth Circuit eventually, hopefully, and get a ruling. The plea offer in all these cases was 90 days. 90 days and you're going to be deported. This guy didn't want to be deported, married to a U.S. citizen. They had a young baby. So he said, no, I want to do everything I can. I said, all right, well, if you lose, the presumptive is like 2.5, I don't remember if it was 2.5 or 4 years, class 4 felony. And you can go to prison for 2.5 years versus just, you've already done 90 days. You can get out and get deported, tomorrow. No, I know it, I want to fight it. So the night before trial, I'm thinking to myself, what on earth are we going to argue? Like, the employer's going to come in and say, this is the name that I know him by. Here's the documents that were used, So my wife and I were now we're in a little bit bigger office, and we're trying to come up with a strategy of what to argue, what our theory of the case is going to be, and finally come up with, well, maybe it wasn't him that turned in those documents. Maybe somebody else did it for him, right? And the stars just lined up at trial. I mean, just went together. Employer comes in and testifies. Well, how's someone hired? Well, the foreman gives them the application. The foreman collects it. The foreman turns it into HR. HR then hires. Okay, and how good of a worker was our guy? Best worker, the most amazing worker ever. He was a leader. My business is hurting now that he's not with us anymore. Great guy. Everybody loved him. He's awesome. All right, well, what about the foreman? Oh, he just quit last week. Right? So now I have a boogeyman. Boogeyman story. It was the foreman that did it. The foreman that mysteriously quit. Nobody knows where he's at because my guy is such a great, amazing worker. And the foreman would fabricate the documents in order to have this guy in his team because it makes him look better. So jury comes back, and I still remember the clerk reading the decision, not guilty in all counts. Right? Amazing. Like, we were going to win. We were going to lose so we could appeal the preemption issue. But we get the victory. The not guilty verdict was the amazing, amazing victory. And then he gets still sent over to immigration, still got an ICE hold because ICE is in the 4th Avenue jail. Goes to immigration, and the Florence Immigrant and Refugee Rights Project, another amazing organization, took on his case pro bono in immigration. He lost his trial that he could stay in the country. They appealed. They won the appeal. They got another trial again. After 2 years of being in detention, he's now a legal permanent resident. All right? Thanks to the Florence Project. They did the heavy work. So he won his immigration case, got legal status, able to stay in the country. If he would have pled guilty, you don't have a chance to apply for that remedy, which is called cancellation of removal, so he would have just been deported. So that's a great case for me to keep in mind in terms of the cases that we're working with now under the Trump administration. So we sued Arpaio in federal court, federal civil rights lawsuit, saying you are preempted from engaging in this kind of activity. As a result of that lawsuit, they stopped doing all of the raids, right? So no more raids occurred after that lawsuit, so that was the precursor, Miguel's story, to the bigger civil lawsuit to end up stopping that practice. There's Miguel Angel right here with his little permanent resident paperwork to be able to stay in the country. Anybody recognize this young woman, young lady? Anybody? No, close. This is an image from, I think, the New York Times. It's my client, Guadalupe Garcia de Rayos. Right? Guadalupe was the first, dubbed as the first person deported by the Trump administration. 2 years ago, about this time 2 years ago, she had a routine ICE check-in, right? So she was in a raid, similar to Miguel Angel, but earlier. So she did plead guilty to the criminal charge, and because of a lot of activism from groups like Puente, the administration under Obama was not deporting folks with those convictions. She was one of the first ones. One of her raids was one of the first ones. So she was allowed to check in at ICE every year, and she has 2 U.S. citizen kids, teenagers, and she went for her check-in under Trump, and Trump decided to deport her. Right? One of the sadder days in my life, when I walked in with her to the ICE office in downtown Phoenix, and I didn't walk out with her. I walked out by myself to go tell her children and her husband that she was taken into custody and they were going to deport her. Horrible, horrible. There's great victories in immigration, and there's also great losses that impact you for life. But we didn't stop with that. The community didn't stop with that. That night, folks were arrested stopping the van in which she was in as immigration was trying to put her back into Mexico. My wife included in that group, right? Pretty amazing of her to go sit in front of the van and take an arrest for that. Unfortunately, ICE was eventually successful in removing her from the country. That was the moment we came out, where she's still detained back there in the building, and we had to tell, that's her kids behind me there. We had to give the horrible news. And then we went on CNN, MSNBC, talking about the case, trying to drum up support and highlight what was going on with it. And there you see the Deport Arizona Mom's lawyer. Trump orders declaration of war on immigrants. This is why I went on national TV and said, these things that Trump's going to do with immigration is going to be a declaration of war on immigrants. And I said that in February 2017. I didn't think it was going to get as bad as it's gotten. And that was my language on national TV, that it's a declaration of war. Never did I imagine that they were going to go to the point of taking children away from their parents as the deterrent for people coming across the border. What could even fathom that as an option? I just thought they're going to try to deport more people in proceedings, more judges, more ICE officers. Complete opposite. They're going after asylum seekers, people who are legally looking for asylum now. We continued to fight the case. This was after we did what's called a Rule 32 in Superior Court, arguing that her original conviction should be overturned because she was not properly advised of the immigration consequences. And there's been a change in law, the Puente, Arizona case, that should allow to reopen her case, right? So it was a very intense hearing. We put up the great fight that we could, but we lost that one too. Right? We had a good judge, a judge I thought was going to rule in our favor. We had good legal arguments, didn't win, and Ms. Garcia de Rayos is still in Mexico. Right? We're still fighting, right? We're still hoping that we're going to get her back someday. Different strategies and techniques we're working on, but nothing in the short term looks like it's going to be successful. So it's not always, I don't get up here to tell you, oh, we win all the time, the world's great. A lot of unjust, horrible things continue to happen, but we have to continue to get up every single day because this case made national news. Our office right now, we have 14 people that work there, 4 attorneys. I can give you 20 more cases just as sympathetic off the top of my head. And we go look deeper, I can probably come up with 50, 75 that we have. And we are one law office in Phoenix, and there's a lot across the country. Right? To me, to put it into perspective, I don't like to argue legality because we lose on that issue. It's illegal to come across the border without documents. It's illegal to submit documentation in purposes of I-9 So I like to go with the bigger picture. And this is a quote from Stokely Carmichael. Anybody Stokely Carmichael fans? Yeah, very good. My youngest son is actually named after him, Little Stokely, Little Stokes. And to me, it's mainly because of this quote that he gave at Berkeley. I can't remember the year, but there's also audio of it, so you can look it up on YouTube. Much more impactful, but I'll read this part to you. I maintain that every civil rights bill in this country was passed for white people, not for black people. For example, I am black. I know that. I also know that while I'm black, I'm a human being. Therefore, I have the right to go into any public place. White people didn't know that. Every time I tried to go into a public place, they stopped me. So some boys had to write a bill to tell the white man, he's a human being, don't stop him. That bill is for the white man, not for me. All right? He goes on to talk about how the other issues in the community, they don't need a civil rights bill for the black community because the black community already knows inherently that they have those rights to live, to vote, to do whatever they want. It's the white people that need the bill to tell them, stop messing with that person. Immigrants' rights, I see it the exact same way. Been doing this long time, been from Guatemala up through Mexico, from the Brownsville to San Diego, in between. I've talked to thousands of migrants. Not one of them doesn't know that they don't have the right to make a better life for themselves and their children. Not one of them doesn't understand that they have inherent human right to make a better life, to work, to migrate, human mobility. They understand that. What we need to do is pass a law so that everybody else can understand that.
Yeah.
Right? So that they can be educated on what human rights means and what it means to live in the 21st century in a connected community. Just as it says out there, we don't need to be talking about building walls. We need to be talking about making the table bigger. And I know each and every one of you feels that same way in your heart. That's why you come from your home. That's why you come on a beautiful Saturday and you come into this room. And it's an honor and a privilege for me to be able to spend time with you, to be in the same room with Mike Wilson, right? I see you in the back there, Mike. All the great work that he's done for years, providing humanitarian aid, and to work with people and to get to know people who have that desire and that passion in their hearts. And together, I am convinced, I am confident that we will make the changes necessary. Not going to be easy, not going to be next year, not going to be 2 years from now, but we continue to fight, we continue to be on the side of morality, and good things at the end of the day, as they happen for Miguel and Angel, will happen for many more people. So thank you so much for your time. Look forward to any questions if I have any time left.